Welcome to BuildIt's Blender texturing tutorial, part of our Intro to Blender series. After watching the first video in our series on 3D modeling, you're probably curious about how to add colors, materials, and textures to make your model look pretty. We'll go over the basics in this video. The first thing we'll need to do is UV unwrap our 3D model. What is UV texture mapping? Just like how X, Y, and Z are the coordinates for a 3D space, U and V are the names for the coordinates we'll be using for a 2D picture plane that will be mapped onto a 3D surface. First, we'll need to quote-unquote unwrap the 3D surface so we can place our 2D image. Let's first use hotkey X to delete the beginning cube and Shift A to make a cylinder so we can get a basic idea of how unwrapping works. We'll also need to pull up the UV image editor window. Let's pull out a new window by grabbing the top right corner of our 3D view window where there's 3 diagonal lines and selecting UV image editor from the editor window. Now we'll go into edit mode to mark where we want to make imaginary cuts that will open up and flatten our 3D model. Make sure you're in edge mode and selecting the edges you want to cut. I'm cutting off the top circles and making a cut on the side so I can open up the model into 2 flat circles and a rectangle. Then use Ctrl E or go to Mesh, then Edges to mark the seam. You can see that it's now red. Now click A to select the whole mesh. And click U to unwrap. Now in your image editor, you'll see the 2 circles and rectangle I had mentioned. You might also notice other unwrap modes than the one that we just used. And this is an idea of what they do. But this is the one that we'll use. You can see here that if you select a face, you can move it around. So if you had an image underneath, whatever this face is on top of is what will show up in the 3D view. You can also use L for linked on face mode to select the linked faces in the cuts. So I'm going to use H to hide that cylinder, and now I'm going to open up a monkey mesh so we can take a look at how to unwrap an object meaningfully. Let's go to edit mode to mark my seams. I can see that that eye is already separated out, so I won't worry about that. I'm going to go with edges mode and mark the face of the monkey, and then I'm going to also mark some edges to split up the back of the head so we can lay it down flat. It's a little gruesome, but it's necessary to make sure our image looks correct. So now when I unwrap, I can see where the face is, where the eyes are, and where the back of the head is. So another trick is to, in the image editor, you can make everything else smaller where there's going to be less detail. And I might imagine that if I was going to texture map this, that my face will have the most detail. So because everything will be in pixels because it's a picture, you want the most pixels to be where the face is. So I'm going to shrink everything down and move it to the side and make the face really big. So if I were to make an image that would correspond to this, I have more room to add more details. So now that you have everything unwrapped, you can start drawing on your 3D model directly in Blender using texture painting. So select that in the 3D view. On the left-hand side, click New Paint Slot, and we'll just use Alpha for now. Then you can select brushes and it'll be pretty self-explanatory from there. Feel free to experiment with different colors and brushes. In the UV image editor, we can actually see what's happening in real time. So on the bottom, if you do image and then you select the image that we just made by opening up a paint slot, you can see how it's being painted. So it's actually going to generate that 2D picture. I'm making kind of like a spooky monkey head since we're nearing Halloween. Okay, so here's some more brushes. You can see that you can change the radius. This smoothing one is wreaking havoc on my computer. It's taking a lot of processing power, so you can see it's very slow and lagging. I'm going to try smear. You can see that one pretty clearly. After you're all done, you're probably going to want to save your image, so go on the bottom, hit image star and save as image, and it'll save as a PNG. Now let's move on to materials. So on the toolbar, properties toolbar on the side, you can see that there's a sphere and that will be our materials tab. I am going to change my render engine from Blender Render to Cycles Render for more materials options. So if you go on the bottom and hit use nodes, you can start selecting different materials. Emission is a cool one that will make your object into like a light emitting object. So you can see here it doesn't show the details of the shadows and stuff, but if I added like a cube, you can see that it's emitting light onto the cube and creating shadows on different objects. So here I just did Shift C to go into the render view. And if I change the strength of the emission, you can see that the brightness goes all the way down. You can change the color here as well. Let's also look at a different one and what that looks like. This one's diffuse. It's kind of a matte material. This one is glossy. Just got to make sure that you're selecting the object. I'm just going to make that into a light source so you can see that more clearly, that it's glossy. Okay. As you become a more advanced CG artist, you can start getting into the node editor for more complex material shaders, and you can do that by selecting the node editor window. So image texturing is the most basic foray into the node editor world. If you click on the little dot next to the color field, you can select image texture and you can see that I created an image texture node. You can hit open and I'm just going to select that image that we just made. You can see that it gets applied right there. So you might want to make image textures that are more specific to your model. You can export your UV map by going to the UV editor, selecting UVs on the bottom, and export UV image to use as a reference to another photo editing or drawing app. And there you have it. There's many more tools out there for more complex usage of the node editor, but now you have the basic tools to make amazing creations.